With this War of Mine's morale system being the thing that ends a lot of runs, it can be very useful to have a character who is able to improve your survivors' moods. Welcome back to a survivor's guide to this War of Mine. Today we will be going over Zlata. So Zlata's trait is Bolsters Spirits, which doesn't have anything to do with the undead, but instead gives her an improved chance of improving people's morale when she consoles them. This can be invaluable to have in your team, as it can be saving some of your strongest scavengers from staying depressed or broken. Just be sure to look after Zlata herself though. This is because she has a combat rating of E and a guard rating of D, so we'll need other characters to look after her so that she can look after them. She does have a decent backpack with 12 slots, meaning she can go out to scavenge if the location is safe enough, and she is able to get around with a medium speed, so she is pretty good to send out and about. When it comes to her personality, she is altruistic and optimistic, meaning she will disapprove of any illegal actions unless it's part of a location's quest, such as the snipers at the construction site or the soldier at the supermarket, and she will be ready to help others in all situations. If she gets traumatized, which does take a lot due to her cheery personality, she can become apathetic and become less affected by those around her. I'd say it's worth keeping her happy though by helping others where you can. The final thing to mention is her guitar ability, which sits at Epic. She is the best character in the game at guitar and is therefore able to boost people's morale through that as well. So that is all of her mechanics out of the way. We will now move on to her stories. Her good story, her bad story, and then follow that up with the possible endings that you can get with her. Zlata's good story. The army is trying to break the rebels' morale with this incessant bombardment, but it's civilians like us that suffer the most. When you've been under fire for so long, you learn to predict where a mortar shell will fall by the sound it makes. I'd never have thought about it, but one fateful day changed everything. The heat was intense and people were lining up for water. I was there with my parents and today. Suddenly, there was a flash and I lost consciousness. Later, I learnt that a mortar shell exploded among us, wounding me and my brother and killing my parents. I had to explain to my brother that they were gone. Can you imagine losing your parents at the age of 6? Doctors did a great job patching us up. We spent a few weeks in the hospital recovering, both physically and mentally, and we were lucky that we survived and we had each other. Our neighbours were helping me look after today, because initially I had trouble catching up with him. Then he got his lucky ticket. The massacre was all over the TV news. In the aftermath, we were approached by a charity which offered foster homes for children in Canada. I decided to let them take Today out of Pogren. He is now safe. I'm temporarily stuck here, but one day I'll join him and we'll be together again. I have a very good reason to stay alive. Zlata's bad story. Did you hear that? Another mortar shell, not very far from here. Many people got used to the sound, but I cringe at every single one of them. I freeze and remember one summer day in the first year of the war, the day which changed everything in my life. The heat was intense and people were lining up for water. I was there with my parents and today when a shell exploded among us. When I got up and looked around, there were screams, blood, dead bodies everywhere, severed limbs. My brother was bleeding, crying, asking where mummy and daddy were. I looked around, then hugged him and started to scream. I don't recall how we got to the hospital. They took out lots of shrapnel from our bodies. I became apathetic in the aftermath. Our neighbours started looking after my brother because I'd lost the will to live. I kept thinking that I had cheated fate on that day. I no longer hid when I heard a shell, and then today was taken from me. The massacre was all over the TV news. The footage showed us, bleeding, crying over the bodies of our parents. A charity got my brother out of Pogren to Canada, to a foster home, but they left me here. I decided to live in spite of everything. One day, I'll go to Canada too. I don't want to die here, all alone and forgotten. It's amazing that Zlata is able to keep her mood up given what she has gone through, but what happens next to her will be up to you. If Zlata dies in the war. Zlata did not survive even though she was so young and so full of life. Would she resume her music studies had she survived? Maybe the world lost a famous musician or composer. If Zlata kills herself. Zlata was a sensitive and compassionate girl who tried to give hope to others. In the end, she lost all hope and took her own life. The world got bleaker the day she was found dead. If Zlata leaves the shelter and abandons the group. Zlata left the shelter one night. she fell victim to human traffickers while trying to reach her brother in Canada. If you reject Zlata. Zlata was not allowed to stay in the shelter. Let's hope she had better luck elsewhere. Now, if Zlata made it to the end of the war, but with poor karma. The war changed Zlata. She survived, but lost her optimism and cheerfulness. She decided against joining her brother. I would only remind him of past horrors, she explained. No, it will be better if I stay in Pogoran. Someone needs to tend to our parents' grave. If Zlata makes it to the end of the war, but is mortified by what has happened. Zlata survived the war, but reaching Canada proved more difficult than she anticipated. Despite the difficulties, she remains determined and still believes she will see Tare one day soon. And finally, if Zlata makes it to the end of the war in good spirits and having not committed atrocities. Zlata survived the war and was reunited with her brother in Canada. It took her some time to adjust to the new reality, but she found a job and even resumed her music studies at the Royal Conservatory in Toronto. So there we have it. Zlata's story wraps up those characters that are in the main game. Next week we will move on to the custom characters and then the DLC characters. I hope you found this video interesting, and if you did, please do like, subscribe, and consider donating to War Child. Thanks very much, and I will see you in the next video. Ta-ra!